What's up, everyone? We are diving back into the multiverse today for another epic. What if Naruto built ultimate harem with all kunoichis in Desert Island Part 1? If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. Naruto tried with a few straight punches and tried a spinning heel kick in mid-leap, aiming at Hinata's head, but Hinata ducked and retaliated with her own kick, forcing Naruto to block with his own hands and move back, avoid several of Hinata's attacks using the gentle fist style of her family. He knew how dangerous that style, recalling his fight with Neji before, and did his best to evade, or if not, he blocked them, but was careful to keep his distance. As they continued to move and fight, they were so engrossed that they didn't notice the heat of the sun, and as it began to set as well into the horizon. Hinata had to admit that she still needed to improve on a few aspects of her gentle fist as she dodged and blocked some of Naruto's kicks and punches, and she was amazed at how fast he could move. When she had seen him fight in their missions together, he wasn't as fast as he was now. Naruto himself admitted that Hinata has certainly improved since he had last seen her fight, as he avoided her attacks, which were moving a lot faster than before and certainly were harder to avoid this time around. But he liked that. She had certainly changed from the shy girl that he knew years before. He was able to outpace her a bit in terms of speed, but she was certainly a lot faster than him. The two continued their sparring and were looking at one another carefully to assess each other's speeds and abilities as they began to get to their stronger attacks. Plus, this allowed them see each other at their best, and it was quite a sight for both of them as well. It was once said that when in combat one sees things in their foe that can tell him or her a lot about the opponent, and this sparring match was no different. Hinata saw how determined Naruto looked as he fought, and she was amazed at how handsome he was when he was at his best. She always admired him from afar, and now she was getting to see him in action herself as they continued to trade blow after blow and evade or block each other's attacks. And like any normal girl in front of her crush, she was feeling very happy. Even though she was still determined to show Naruto her growth as a kunoichi, still she felt hot as she watched him move, and her imagination began to play with the images on the back of her mind on how those muscles would move as they fought on. Naruto also noted how attractive Hinata was when she was fighting with all of her skill and determination, and he admitted to himself that she looked very much at her best as she continued to trade blow after blow with him. She looked very much an attractive woman as they moved and fought with one another with each blow, as he too was determined to see just how much Hinata had changed since he had last seen her and worked with her all those years before he went to train under Jiraiya for 3 long years, and from what he was seeing now, she had changed, not to mention he began to look at her form even more, and even when he did it to determine her moves he couldn't help but wonder how she looked without. Both sparring partners shook those thoughts out of their minds and focused on their match as the day wore on. And when night finally set in, both were tired and decided to call it a day. They, however, had plenty of leftover food and were able to reheat the cooked food and ate their remainder for their dinner, and Naruto complimented Hinata. "Wow, you've really gotten stronger, Hinata. I had a hard time just managing to try and hit you. You really must have been training hard since the last time we worked together." "TT, thank you. I wanted to get stronger, just like I promised." Naruto smiled at that as he saw how cute Hinata was when she blushed and twiddled her fingers. "Well, you've kept your promise, and I think that you'll be a great ninja in a few more years' time." Thank you." As the two of them watched the moon rise over the sea and cover sea with a silvery glow, they then wondered just how things were at Konoha while they were here. And they once more decided to go back to sleep in the cave, with Naruto making the fire to keep them warm for the night, and they both went to sleep. The next day, no sign of a ship, Hinata. Naruto asked as he checked the fuel for their signal fire on the early morning once the two of them were awake. He had decided to later see what else they could find on the island on this day, as they had only explored a portion of the place, plus he might find some stuff that could be useful for them while they were still here. Hinata was using her Byakugan as she looked at the horizon and shook her head sadly. "No, I don't see any ship yet. I hope they find us soon, Naruto-kun." "Don't worry, they will. Come on, let's go see the rest of this little island of ours." Hinata blushed but nodded as she followed Naruto to explore their little island. The two began to consider this island their own personal place as they stayed here for 3 days now and they wanted to find out anything about the island they were staying in until they were rescued. For the first time, Hinata was not fainting as she held her crush's hand as they both went to see the rest of their island, and saw large patches of flowers nearby, some that were safe and others that were poisonous. There were large trees everywhere and the hills naturally had fields of green grass over them, along with some of the hills being bare of any coverage. They arrived at the mountain and decided to leave that island alone for the time being as they looked about and spotted other animals in the area, namely wild pigs, rabbits, birds, and more as they looked about. They wondered why such a lush and bountiful island was not inhabited at all, but they found no sign of any habitation and any underground bases in this island at all. It was a perfectly deserted island and they were here for the time being until they were found. The two decided to take their time to explore the island and enjoy the solitude as well as this allowed them to relax a bit more in the feel of the cool breeze as it came from the high mountains, that no doubt had snow on the top of it. As they arrived at the hill that overlooked the whole island they watched the place and surveyed the island. This island, it sure is a nice place to be in, right Naruto-kun? Yeah, makes me wonder why no one decided to build a small home here. This place would have been a good retreat. The two ninjas sat down on the fresh grass and took in the beauty of the island and took the time to think about other things just for today. Naruto was still intent on finding Sasuke and bringing him back to Konoha. While he knew that Sasuke was still after his brother Itachi, he wanted to make sure that his former teammate was safe and would at least, after he did deal with Itachi, he would come back home, though how that was going to happen and when was beyond him, but he kept hoping. For now, however, his thoughts on the matter were now being joined by his thoughts on Hinata and he began to think back on the times he had known the Hyuga girl. He began to recall the times they had been together, from the Chunin exams, to the missions he had been with her, and when they had worked together to find Sasuke one time and in each instance he began to see that Hinata indeed cared for him and was really a great friend, and also, maybe more, but he still was not sure how to tell her about his resident guest. They then foraged and hunted for their food and after they were done, they cooked their food and began to have breakfast. As they ate, Naruto then decided to at least talk to Hinata to finally answer the question that he had about if she did have feelings for him in a very important sense. But he made sure to put that off until he was ready, for now he wondered how things were at Konoha. Back in Konoha, the situation in the hidden village of the Leaf was far from perfect as the rains that fell on the village kept everyone indoors, and the storms that were there were really making movement hard. And one particular situation made things a heck of a lot worse for the people involved. In the Hokage's office. Damn it! When will this blasted storm clear out of here already? Tsunade was furious as she looked at the latest weather report and the fact that it was still unsure just when the storm would end and the skies would be clear and the sea safe enough to send out a rescue party for Naruto and Hinata. The Godime was not very happy at least 2 days before when she had been told that Naruto and Hinata were lost in a massive storm that hit the sea and their ship that was already bound to return to port. In fact, she had been outright worried sick for Naruto and Hinata. She might have a brave and tough front and always being critical and serious, but she does show deep sympathy for those close to her, and most of all for Naruto, which was far from surprising as Naruto had been the one who broke her free from her past and allowed her this chance to make things right for herself and to honor both Dan and Naoki. Naruto reminded her greatly of the two most important people in her life, and the thought of not being able to find him, all because of the fickle weather, was already eating away at her patience. Hinata had already improved well from before, and like everyone else who knew Hinata in any degree, she knew that it was due to Naruto that the former shy and quiet genin had reached the rank of Chunin, and had helped ease the tensions between both Hyuga families, and that was a good thing as well. She knew that others were also worried about the fates of the two missing people. And even the villagers wondered just where the two had disappeared to and when they would be coming back. Already various types of rumors were circulating about their fates, and some of the rumors were either mildly or hysterically humorous and cute, to downright wrong and far-fetched. Everyone in the village, including her, knew about Hinata's long-term crush on the blonde loud-mouthed ninja and container for the Kyuubi, and even though she had her doubts about Naruto finding out about the Hyuga heiress crush on him of all people, she couldn't help but wonder at the possibility that while they were alone together, he might finally get the message, but considering how dense the blonde ninja was at times, that might not happen. She sighed as she looked out once more at the dark sky over Konoha, and at that same moment, Jiraiya walked in, along with Shizune the perverted hermit sage, trainer of Naruto, and naturally her only remaining teammate now that Orochimaru had died after Sasuke killed him, sighed as he also looked out to the rain. Still no change. Not a damn thing. The storm over the entire fire country's still too dangerous for any ship to go out right now. The perverted hermit side was also worried about Naruto, not just for the fact that he made a promise to train the boy, but to make sure that Akatsuki never got their filthy hands on him and the Kyuubi. He didn't want his former student Namikaze Minato and Kushina Uzumaki, who were Naruto's parents, even if they were dead, to think that he was going to let their son die out there alone. The only silver lining the perverted hermit could see was the fact that Hinata was with Naruto. Like everyone else, the perverted ninja knew for a fact that Hinata had a mountain-sized crush on his star pupil, and he was eager to see if Naruto would finally get it on with Hinata. He had nothing against Sakura, and he knew for a fact that despite her temper with Naruto's perverted nature on occasion, she cared for him too much to let him be harmed, now that she knew the secret burden he had carried all his young life. However, despite the closeness the two had, he doubted that a very serious relationship would spring between the two. Friendship between them was enough for now. He then smirked a bit and spoke. I know for a fact that Naruto is safe and alive, and with him taking care of Hinata, things are going to get interesting indeed. What are you talking about this time? I'm thinking that maybe the two of them, well, you know what I mean by that, so why should I explain that to you? Tsunade got up her desk and glared at her perverted teammate. Even if she was entertaining the idea herself, she still doubted that Naruto would actually notice Hinata crush on him, even more so that Naruto and Hinata would even consider eloping. Are you trying to be funny, Jiraiya? There is no way that will ever happen between them. And how can you be so sure about that? Tsunade glared at her teammate and fellow Sannin with a glare as the two of them were getting ready to butt heads with each other over something. They had done it many times when they were still kids and when they were already grown-ups as well. Shizune also knew that to be true, and she was already standing aside as her mentor and her teammate began to glare at each other. There is no way that Naruto would ever decide to make the moves on Hinata. He's still too dense to even notice that she's head over heels in love with him, and you know it. Oh really? Well then I say that you're wrong. There's no way what you have in that perverted mind is going to happen at all, Jiraiya. Really? Care to bet on that? Tsunade was wary about this sort of thing as she had betted a lot of times and lost, but she also knew that if she ever won, something bad was going to happen. She knew that to be true as she had won the lottery on the day that Gaara had been kidnapped by Akatsuki, and that told her that something had gone wrong, and she was right as she had dispatched Guy and his team to aid Naruto and the others. And the help came right on time, as well as they were able to help Naruto greatly. Even if Gaara had died, he had been brought back to life by Chio and Naruto, and that was enough. Fine then, I'll take that bet. I bet that if I am right and Naruto and Hinata don't elope, you don't get to peep at any of the women in Konoha for the next 6 months. Fine, and if I win, then I get to do my research uninterrupted by either you or the Anbu for the next 6 months as well. Deal? Deal. Elsewhere, in the Hyuga residence, a lot of things were happening as many servants and family members were deep in their work. Some, however, were praying for the safe return of Hinata back to Konoha. They had grown quite close to Hinata and fond of the heiress, including Hanabi, Hinata's younger sister. She had begun to idolize her big sister, and she was the one who would always ask when they could go out and find her big sister. Hiyashi was not very happy with these turns of events, and he hoped that the storms would pass soon so he could be reunited with his eldest daughter. He had long ago treated Hinata the way he did, not because he didn't love her, but because her kind and shy nature, plus her tendency to give up in the past, made her very vulnerable. In fact, he had been keeping tabs on Hinata for some time, even without Kurenai's knowledge, as he wanted Hinata to grow and be strong, but despite his actions and attitudes towards her, she didn't seem to have that drive to become stronger. Until Naruto Uzumaki came into her life, that is. He, like all the elder ninjas, knew about the nine-tailed fox in the young blonde ninja, which was sealed into him by the 4th Hokage. Like the others, he followed the order of the 3rd Hokage to never tell anyone in his family about what happened, and he naturally had a healthy amount of fear for the demon. But he had to admit that the young boy who was the container for the nine-tailed fox was far from being the demon others thought him to be. He, however, noted the very strong effects Naruto had on his daughter Hinata. He would have not allowed her having a crush on him had he not noted that Hinata began to train herself harder every day to try and impress both him and Naruto, but even then, she didn't have the courage to stand up for herself, and she nearly was reduced to tears by Neji when they fought against one another. It was only when Naruto told her to stand up for herself that Hinata fought with Neji seriously, and while Hinata had lost and nearly died, she had apparently gained the strength, acknowledgement, and support she needed to finally push herself to achieve and strive for the best. He noted that very well, and despite not showing it, he approved of her change of attitude, and after the Baikouchu mission, he was happy that she was now more confident in herself and was willing to fight real opponents and to strive to make herself truly a Hyuga. That also allowed him to finally be a father to her, and thankfully, their relationship had been mended, all because of Naruto. It wasn't just his daughter who was changed by Naruto, but his nephew Neji as well. Long ago, he had been at odds with his twin brother Hisashi, Neji's father, since Hisashi was of the branch family. And as such, his nephew had grown to hate and resent him and his family, even if they were indeed related, and that hatred grew when Hisashi took his place when he had killed the ninja that tried to kidnap Hinata. To see that Neji was very talented and strong was a great surprise to Hisashi, and to see him defeated by Naruto, and where Naruto told him that fate can be changed and to quit thinking that everything is predestined, gave him the chance to finally tell Neji the truth of why his father died. He couldn't blame Neji for not believing him when he gave his nephew his father's last letter before he died, and how he might harbor hatred still, but his defeat by Naruto's hands and the truth of his father's choice made Neji change, and for the first time, Hisashi chose to train Neji himself, and as head of the Hyuga family, he had the authority to do so as well. And when he had a chance to speak to Neji after he recovered with his battle with the Sound Village ninja Kidomaru, who had discovered the Byakugan's weakness and nearly killed him, he was impressed that Neji confessed that he now understood what it was for his teammate Rock Lee, for Hinata, and for Naruto to face a foe who was stronger and deadlier than them. If it hadn't been for his defeat by Naruto, who told him that anyone could change their destiny, and himself realizing that he had to truly prove that the Hyuga clan was the best of the best in Konoha and that he still had the chance to win, he admitted that he would have truly died that day. It was Naruto who took him out of the darkness of his own making and made him see the light and break his own cage. In all that, Hisashi knew that he truly owed Naruto Uzumaki a great deal of thanks for all he had done for his family, for his daughter, and his nephew as well. That was why he was hoping that when the storms passed over Konoha, he and the others would go out and find them both. Master Hisashi. Hisashi turned and spotted Neji as he arrived in the courtyard. The Jonin sat down next to his uncle, and Hisashi spoke to his nephew. You don't need to call me that here, Neji. I'm sorry, uncle, I guess it's an old habit. That's all right, any new word on when the storm clears? Neji sighed and gave his uncle the bad news so far. There's been no change, I'm afraid to say. The storms are still keeping the ships in port, including the one that Tsunade-sama had chartered for the rescue operations. It might take another day or more before we can find them. I see, then we must wait. Both Hinata and Naruto are stronger than they were back then, Neji. You and I both know that, they will be all right. Neji nodded as he looked at the rain. Both uncle and nephew took the time to contemplate their own thoughts, until Neji decided to ask a question, which in his mind was of great importance. Like all the others, he knew about his cousin's deep-seated affection for Naruto, and while he didn't find anything wrong with them being close, he wondered how his uncle and Hinata's father would react if ever Hinata and Naruto would. As much as he discounted the notion of that ever happening, considering Hinata's innate shyness, and Naruto's obliviousness, he wanted to know either way on what his uncle's reaction should be if it did happen. Uncle, I'd like to ask you something. Go ahead, Neji. Well, I assume that you are aware of Hinata's, infatuation with Naruto. Hisashi broke a rare smile at that remark, and that surprised Neji as well, and he replied. Of course I have been aware of Hinata's crush on him. I've known for a very long time. Why do you ask? Well, I know this might sound, offensive. But if anything were to happen between Naruto and Hinata, would you approve of it? Hisashi couldn't help himself but smile at the idea. That was a very interesting question that his nephew put before him, and naturally he deserved to answer it as well. Hinata is her own person now, Neji, just as you are your own person as well. If that does happen, as long as Hinata is happy, then she has my blessing. Neji nodded and smiled at the thought. He had to admit that he was dying to see just how things would go between his cousin and her crush. By the way, Neji. Yes, uncle. How is your relationship with Tenten going? I heard that you actually asked her out on a date before all this happened. Is that date still going to happen? Now it was Neji's turn to blush. In the Ichiraku ramen stand, the business was rather slow today as Tuki and Ayame looked on at the rain that continued to fall down around the street that they had set up shop for a very long time. It's really depressing that Naruto's not around, isn't it? Ayame missed the young ninja and she hoped that as soon as the storms passed, the village could go out and try and find him and Hinata as well. She missed the young man's antics and his patronage of their ramen shop. Yes, I really miss him here, the place seems too dull without him around. Tuki said as he missed the young ninja and his antics, not to mention the fact that he was their best customer. Konohamaru and his teammates were here frequently for the past 2 days, hoping to hear news of Naruto from the two, and even Ebisu, Konohamaru's ninja sensei, was concerned about the news as he knew how much the grandson of the deceased third Hokage respected the loudmouth ninja. I hope they'll be found and that the gods would soon move this weather. Ayame said, and then Tuki smiled as he had a plan. When he gets back here, I'm going to give him a very special treat. Just for that day of his return, we'll let him have all that he wants from the menu for free. In Kurenai's home, Yuhi Kurenai looked at the rain and wondered how her student Hinata was doing, and she hoped that the young Chunin was safe and sound. The red-eyed kunoichi walked over to the picture she had with her students on her desk. In the picture was her standing behind Kiba, Shino, and Hinata and smiled a bit as she recalled their times together. Normally she would be helping them when they were together, but with her son growing in her belly she had to take the time off as she needed to be ready soon when the baby would be born. At least Hinata would have a good friend to keep an eye on. She always had a soft spot for Hinata after she had been charged by Hiyashi to take care of Hinata, and it did her heart good that both Hinata and her father were now on better terms with one another, and she was very supportive of her student's longtime crush on Naruto. She knew how great an influence the blonde ninja was for her student and how much Hinata liked him. To her it was very nice to see and know that Hinata was happy. Like all the other adult ninja, she knew about Naruto having the Kyuubi inside of him, and while she too had a very healthy amount of fear of the Biju in the boy, she saw things differently. Naruto was at first a clown, but after seeing him defeat Kiba, her opinion changed, and also his support for Hinata was very much welcome, and witnessing him defeat Neji with the Kyuubi's chakra without becoming a monster was a great sign, plus the other times she had known the blonde ninja. She however had another very good reason to be very supportive of Hinata's crush on Naruto. In her youth, she had a strong affection for the Yondaime when he was still alive then, and she had even been like Hinata when she once asked him out, but he had already been reported to have been married at the time, and while it made her sad, this allowed her to meet Asuma. Asuma was not a perfect guy, not like the Yondaime in her mind, but he was nice, despite his habit of smoking. She was sad when she heard that the Yondaime died and she met Naruto for the first time when he was a child. She was able to notice physical similarities between the young boy and the Yondaime, and when she saw him in battle, there was something about his ways of fighting that made her recall the Yondaime, and the fact that the Yondaime was married. Naruto may not be a total genius like the Yondaime, but he had heart and compassion, and in the same way as the Yondaime himself, and that made her wonder if Naruto was the Yondaime's son. She had asked Asuma's father, the third Hokage, about this fact, but Sarutobi replied with a smile that she should decide for herself what she thought and not let an old man's words be the base for her to decide on. That in her mind was enough to tell her that her thoughts on the Yondaime being Naruto's father were dead on. In truth, it was understandable that no one else might know that Naruto was the Yondaime's son. The Yondaime, Namikaze Minato, was quite the legend and was the greatest ninja of Konoha of his time and made many enemies. If they ever found out he had a family, there would be no end to the number of enemies that would try and kill them. And being the kind-hearted, compassionate, and selfless man that he was, the Yondaime would have wanted nothing to hurt his village or his family. That was why she supported Hinata in the Hyuga era's attempts to get closer to Naruto. Besides, the young woman would have made worse if she tried to have a crush on others anyway. She couldn't help but hope that Hinata was alright and that someday, she would finally be able to tell Naruto how much she felt about him. In the Yamanaka flower shop, Sakura and Ino were looking at the rain, along with their other comrades, Tenten, Rock Lee, Kiba, Shino, Shikamaru, Choji, and even for once, Sai as well. They were still wondering when they would be able to go out and find the two of their group of friends. They each had been very busy with their chores when they got word that Naruto and Hinata was lost in a storm at sea. The second Sakura heard that, she became very worried for her teammate and friend as she and Naruto had gotten closer ever since they began to work together again. It was a bit hard for her to imagine Naruto being helpless, but she was not going to let any harm come to Naruto ever since she knew his secret. She had always wondered why he was treated differently and with such disdain and hatred by others, even when she was young, after knowing what happened to him and his show of his emotional state during the mission to rescue Gaara before he was resurrected and afterwards. She may draw the line at his perverted side while denying her own, but when it concerned the dangers of him being killed by Akatsuki for the Kyuubi sealed inside of him and losing her best friend, she was not going to stand by and do nothing. With that in mind, Sakura began to pace, and while the others understood her state of mind, they were getting rather distracted as Sakura continued to pace in the flower shop back and forth over and over again for the next few minutes. Even Shino was getting distracted. Ino naturally decided to get into the act and speak to her friend. Sakura, calm down, pacing back and forth isn't going to help, you know. I know, it's just, I can't stand doing nothing here. Naruto's out there along with Hinata and lost at sea. Gods only knows what's happening to them out there. I really worried right now. Worried about them. Hinata and Naruto will be fine. Naruto's certainly changed a great deal since I saw him take down that Akatsuki guy with that new jutsu of his, plus he's been trained really hard, you know. He'll be fine, and so will Hinata. She's a lot stronger than she was before, you know. Sakura sighed at that and looked at Ino, who was close to Sai, and she naturally replied. I know that, but that certainly doesn't make things easier. Naruto might still be the same, but he has grown up a lot from the old Naruto we all knew back in the academy, you know. The others nodded at what Shikamaru said, as they all knew just how different Naruto was now from before. However, it still made them wonder that if Naruto and Hinata were still safe and alive, what exactly was happening to them right now. The only one who naturally didn't know anything about the Hyuga era's longtime crush on the blonde ninja was naturally Sai, since he was not from the Rookie 9 group that made up Shikamaru, Sakura, Choji, Ino, Kiba, Shino, Sasuke, and naturally Naruto and Hinata. The only one to bring it up was naturally one of them, namely Ino. Do you guys think that maybe Hinata might finally, well, you know, tell Naruto about her long-time crush on him? The others looked at the blonde kunoichi with some surprise, and then, the gloomy atmosphere was replaced by smirks and chuckles at the thought of what was happening right now with Naruto and Hinata. The only one who didn't understand was Sai, and he naturally decided to find out just what they were talking about. What does that mean? And why would Hinata, who's the Hyuga clan heiress, have a crush on Naruto? Does she intend to hurt him in some way? The others looked at him with some surprise, and Sakura decided to explain to her teammate Sai just what was it they were talking about, just in case Sai got the wrong impression about Hinata. Hinata likes Naruto, ever since she first lay eyes on him back in our academy days and all the way to now, and she likes him, however she's too shy to say anything to him about it, no matter how many hints she sends his way. I don't know exactly why he doesn't notice. Maybe because he only has eyes for Sakura. Kiba said as he patted Akamaru's head. Ino had allowed the massive dog into her family shop as long as Akamaru didn't suddenly shake his fur and soak them with the remaining water on his body. The others noted Kiba's comments and also noted that, while Sakura sighed as well. She knew that Naruto really liked her, but she doubted that there would be a relationship between them. There was a lot of history between them, and she knew that she couldn't look at Naruto that way, not after how she used to treat him. She preferred it better that Hinata and Naruto were the ones who got together, since Hinata really liked Naruto. I don't think we'd get along well. Ino raised an eyebrow at that statement and shook her head. How can you say that, Sakura? Since compared to how you two used to get along in the past, that is when you're not angry with him, you two seem to get along just fine, a lot better if I might add. Sakura sighed and replied at her friend's words. Maybe because I guess that since he never talks to me like the old days, the way he used to anymore, then it's a sign that part of him is giving up on me. But I think that we will always be friends, but I think, not in the way that Naruto might want us to be. The others thought about that and decided to drop the topic about the relationship between Sakura and Naruto, seeing as it was not going to be something they were willing to talk about themselves. However, that certainly didn't mean that they were not going to talk about the relationship between Naruto and Hinata, as they each traded stories on the subject. Kiba and Shino would talk about their missions with Naruto and Hinata in company, and even Sakura would trade one of her own, that is until Sai decided to ask. I was reading a book made by Jiraiya that mentioned something like this, so do you think that Naruto and Hinata Hyuga would, what's that word again, go to the bedroom and… Sai barely got the words out when Sakura, in a look of absolute shock, reached out and covered his mouth, but her actions were too late, as everyone in the shop apart from Sai knew what that meant, as they all began to smirk, grin, blush, giggle, and eventually all of them began to laugh, and they talked about how that would happen and what would happen between Naruto and Hinata. Sakura sighed and called their attention with a glare, and she then replied. There is no way that it will ever happen between those two. But wouldn't it be nice, Sakura? I mean, we all know how much Hinata would love to finally be alone with Naruto, and who knows what can happen. Sakura sighed and glared at the smiling duo of Ino and Tenten as she wondered at the possibility of it really happening, but she still had her doubts. Apart from the elders of the village, including Hinata's father and Neji's uncle, Tsunade, the Anbu, Kakashi, Yamato, Shizune, the Sand siblings Tamari, Kankuro, and Gaara, and herself, no one else knew about Naruto being the container of the Kyuubi. She made a pledge to never reveal it to anyone in her circle of friends and comrades, and to Hinata herself. She was afraid that if Hinata ever found out about Naruto's burden, she would be terrified of him and would do something that would really cause harm in Naruto's life. Though she doubted that Hinata would ever actually do that, she couldn't deny the possibility, and she shivered mentally at the thought of how the others would react if they found out. She only hoped that there would be time for Hinata to be properly told about her crush's hard secret, or else, who knew what could happen. Speaking of which, back on the island, Naruto was currently waiting in the cave to make the sleeping fire for himself and Hinata, and he had already taken care of the fuel for the signal fire. And they had been able to cook and eat their dinner after training once more after lunch. As he got the fire working with the flint and his kunai, he then began to think on how he would be able to tell Hinata about his long-hidden secret. But he was afraid. He had been able to see glimpses of the woman before him for the past few days, and he was afraid that if he did tell her about his secret, then she would be scared and terrified of him, and hate him. But he decided to just get it over and done with, since he knew that if he didn't tell her himself, then sooner or later, someone who knew about his status as a Jinchuriki would twist the truth to Hinata, and when she did find out it was true, he didn't even want to guess what could happen. As Hinata came into the cave, he waited for her to sit down on their bedding, and he decided to ask her the question that he knew would make Hinata very embarrassed, but he had to know her true feelings before he committed himself to tell her his own secret. Hinata. Why? Yes, Naruto-kun. I want to know something. And if you don't want to answer me now, then you can answer me some other time when you are finally comfortable enough to tell me. Are you ready? I guess so. Naruto took a deep breath and calmed himself and asked Hinata the question. Do you like me? Hinata blushed bright red at that and felt her heart race, as she never expected Naruto to suddenly ask her such a question. She had been hoping for the chance to tell him how she felt about him when she had the courage, but now he wanted to know her feelings towards him. She felt as if she was about to faint once more, but she decided to calm herself and began to speak. Why, you are important to me, Naruto-kun. Please, I have to tell him now. I might never get another chance. I must not faint. I always watched you when we were in the academy, when we were still genin. And I always admired you so many times. I really felt you were going to be a great ninja someday. And I always liked I always liked you, Naruto-kun. For a very long time, I liked you, actually, more than like you, I guess. What do you mean? Well, say it. Before Hinata could say it, Naruto finished it for her. Her words, plus all the times he recalled when he was with her in their earlier years and the times they had together now told him what he wanted to know. You love me. Hinata nearly lost her consciousness and gulped loudly as she twiddled her fingers, and she felt that she was going to faint as she decided to say it once and for all. I do. Naruto looked at Hinata, stunned that the truth finally came out and what the Kyuubi had told him was true. Hinata Hyuga was in love with him and she had just told him that in this place. All the times she had been kind to him were now making sense and he felt relieved that he knew the truth about why she was always being kind and supportive of him and why she was always this way with him when he was near her. Now came the moment he dreaded, to tell her about the Kyuubi. Hinata, I thank you for telling me the truth. I know, it feels better now that I've told you about how I feel, Naruto-kun. Hinata wiped the tears in her eyes that threatened to fall as she thought she would cry at finally telling her crush, and now her object of affection about how much she loved him. But I don't think that you would want me. But I do love you. I really do. I'm not lying about that. I know, you could never lie to me, but I want to tell you something that might change your mind about me. What do you mean? Hinata, do you know about the Kyuubi? Hinata knew about the nine-tailed fox and how it had attacked Konoha years ago. She had been only a baby at the time and had heard stories about how the beast killed many of the people in Konoha and nearly wiped the village out. The Kyuubi was nearly able to destroy Konoha had it not been for the Yondaime and his noble sacrifice of sealing the Kyuubi and giving up his life, then the village of Konoha would have been wiped out, but what does that have to do with Naruto? I know that it nearly wiped out the village years ago, but that is it. Naruto gulped and spoke slowly as he recalled the time he found out the truth about himself. Hinata, did you ever wonder why the villagers hated me and treated me the way they did? I did before, but why did they do that? Why did they hate you? Because Hinata, the Kyuubi was sealed in a male baby in order to stop its rampage in Konoha, and that baby grew up to be treated like a monster, like the Kyuubi, though no one told others why. Do you understand me now? Hinata didn't understand it at first and was very much confused, but when she began to recall how others would look at Naruto and she could hear their whispers and comments about him, it didn't take long for the Hyuga girl to put two and two together and realize just why Naruto said that he would tell her something that would make her change her mind. Naruto-kun, you were that baby. Naruto nodded slowly as he placed his hand on his stomach, the same place where the nine-tailed fox resided in his body. And he continued to speak to Hinata. I found out about it when I was fooled by Mizuki to steal the sealing scroll. I was angry when he told me about using me to steal the scroll for his own ends. Uruka-sensei, who tried to help me, tried to stop Mizuki from telling me about, but that traitor did it anyway. I was hurt and angry. But I was saved and I decided to live with it. But so many people still hated me. I wanted to tell you this before you found it out in another way and would be lied to. I can understand if you want to leave and be on the other. Hinata, however, was having none of it as she tackled Naruto and instead of hurting the blonde ninja, looked at him straight in the eyes. And kissed him. Naruto looked at Hinata with absolute shock. The blonde shinobi had expected her to run away from him in fear, and fight him, but not this. He was not expecting to be suddenly knocked down and kissed by the dark-haired and white-eyed girl. He couldn't help but react as he slowly stopped resisting and kissed Hinata back. Hinata was shocked by what she learned about Naruto and she could understand why he said that she would change her mind about him. But she was not going to change her mind. Naruto may have the Kyuubi inside of him, but he was not the Kyuubi. Naruto was a human being and he had a heart and he had emotions, and he was a person who was strong and brave. He had done so much and he was kind, compassionate, and gentle. He was not a demon in her eyes. No matter what, she saw him for who he was, and that was a great ninja, a great friend, a great ally, and her beloved. The truth about him may have caught her by surprise, but she was not going to change her mind about Naruto, her Naruto-kun. As she broke the kiss, Naruto tried to speak to her. Hinata, why are you Because I love you, Naruto-kun, and I mean it. But what about? You may have the Kyuubi inside of you, Naruto-kun, but you are not the Kyuubi, you are you, no one else. I love you for who you are then, and I love you for who you are now. The truth may complicate things, but I won't change how I feel about you, Naruto-kun. I love you now and always, please say that you love me too. Naruto couldn't help but blush and feel his heart beat even faster as he could see and hear the truth in Hinata's words. She loved him, even if the Kyuubi was inside of him, she still loved him, and the feelings that simple truth had unleashed were amazing to him. And this time he was confident of his answer. I love you too. Naruto-kun. Naruto then smiled with a perverted style. And I'm going to prove it too. It's lemon time, ladies and gentlemen. Naruto got up and both he and Hinata sat on their bed covered with the soft and sweet-smelling leaves, which they covered with rabbit skins that they were able to sew together with thin but strong fiber in their kunai. He looked at her and marveled at the coppery hue the fire gave her and made her eyes glow. With that in her blush, he reached out and kissed Hinata gently and slowly. This made Hinata moan as she began to kiss him back with equal fervor. The Hyuga girl couldn't help but feel her body become alive as she savored the taste and feel of her beloved's lips on hers. She had dreamed of doing this for a very long time, and now her dreams were coming true. Naruto had been reading a lot of things about sei and love making, and in fact, he might not have told anyone this, but he had been able to finally get enough material on how to actually make love to a woman, but he kept in mind that while he had some idea on how it was done, he wanted this to be perfect between him and Hinata as she was his girlfriend now, and they were going to make love to one another. In truth, he had dreamed of doing this with Sakura, but now, it seemed to be more right to him to be doing this with Hinata. Their chaste kissing grew in intensity and soon, they began to kiss each other more intensely and Hinata shyly responded as she slowly opened her mouth to Naruto's gentle prodding, and when she did, he opened his mouth as well. The Kyuubi container then slowly licked her teeth, making Hinata moan, and when Naruto placed his tongue into her mouth gently tempting her to do the same, she nearly fainted on the spot. Hinata slowly moved her own tongue, and the moment her tongue touched Naruto's, both of them moaned out as they tasted and touched each other, and when they slowly began to deeply kiss each other, they both got an idea of what they would be doing soon enough, as their deep kissing and tasting of each other was already qualifying as a sei act on its own. As they broke their kiss, they began to slowly disrobe one another, with Naruto removing Hinata's jacket and Hinata removing Naruto's own jacket as well. They did so and then removed their inner clothes, with Naruto managing to find the special latch that held the upper portion of Hinata's body suit together with the lower piece. It didn't take very long for the two ninja to finally be able to see each other nod. And they both liked what they saw. Hinata blushed brightly as she looked at her love's body and admired the muscles that were in his body. She looked at his face first, marveling his sky-blue eyes and the strong but handsome features on his face. Even the whisker-like marks on his cheeks didn't detract his features in the least in her eyes. Her gaze traveled down to his chest and torso, marveling at the muscles she saw there, testament to the years of training that her long-time crush and love had been through all his life. She then admired the muscles in his arms and then his hands, relishing the thought of them touching her now gnawed form. She then looked at the seal that showed to her where the nine-tailed fox was contained and wasn't afraid of it at all. In fact, when she looked at it, it made her admire how brave and strong Naruto was for bearing the burden that he had been given as a baby. Naruto also blushed as he was now able to see Hinata nod, and it was quite the sight as he took in the smooth and soft cream white look of her skin. There were some scars here and there, but they hardly detracted the picture of female beauty before him as he stared at her face, the smooth and soft lines of her features and her eyes with the Byakugan, and her dark long hair. His gaze went lower to her chest and he admired her breasts. They were larger than when he saw them in her clothes, and Naruto admitted that given a few years, Hinata would have been a bit of a match for Tsunade. Her breasts, however, were firm-looking and her deep pink nipples looked hard and very tempting to the male ninja, and he looked to her lower form, admiring the smooth and flat look of his beloved's tummy. Naruto then reached out and touched Hinata's face gently, running his hands on the smooth lines of her jaw, and then moved his hands to her neck, admiring the smooth softness of her skin and that the feel of her body was very nice. He reached her breasts and blushed as she reached out to feel the fleshy orbs, and he was in awe at how soft yet firm Hinata's breasts were as he touched them. Hinata moaned loudly as she felt his hands on her breasts. Truth be told, she was a bit worried about her breasts as they had become rather large, and she was a bit afraid that they would attract too much attention towards her and she would be in trouble. However, the way Naruto touched her breasts and the way he seemed to love touching them made her realize that maybe she shouldn't worry too much about them. Naruto-kun likes them, so I guess they're all. Oh. Ah, Naruto-kun. Hinata's reaction was obvious as Naruto leaned forward, knocking her back into their mattress of leaves and rabbit skins, and he was now kissing and sousing her breasts, while holding, touching, and massaging them with absolute gentleness and passion, and the feelings of her love's hot mouth and tongue on her nipples and breasts, with his hands touching them, made the Hyuga heiress moan and cry out at the sensations as she ran her hands on his back, feeling the muscles in her hands. Naruto loved the feel of Hinata's skin and he loved the feel of her soft body underneath his a lot. He looked at Hinata as she looked back at him with love and desire in her eyes. He smiled back and continued to worship her breasts, starting with her right breast, making Hinata hold him to her tight as she didn't want to lose the feelings he was sending throughout her body, and she was loving it all. She felt that all of her dreams and hopes had led to this one night here on this island and she was not going to give up now. Naruto then gave the same loving treatment to Hinata's left breast, further making the Hyuga heiress making moaning and mewling sounds that served to make Naruto even more aroused as he felt his COC in his pants harden even more. As soon as he was done, he gave a parting kiss and licked to both her breasts and traced his tongue and lips on her smooth lower torso, but he also ran his hands on her body slowly, loving the feel of her smooth skin. He reached the waist of her pants and lower body suit, and with patience and a bit of fumbling, he with Hinata's help managed to remove her pants, sandals and her body suit, and he smirked as he saw the black panties that Hinata wore. He smiled at his lover and replied, "Why, Hina-chan, I didn't know you wore such naughty clothes." Naruto-kun. Naruto merely kissed her as he gently reached out and removed her panties, taking into account that her panties were already wet, telling him that she was already wet in her say. He looked at her most private place, but then Hinata's shyness came back as she covered her puss with her hands. "PPP please, don't look at me like that there. I'm so embarrassed." Naruto was sorely tempted to grab her hands and push them aside, but he didn't. As much as he did hear about Jiraiya's perverted antics, he knew better than to force Hinata, and therefore he patiently replied to her. "You don't need to be embarrassed, you are so beautiful already, Hina-chan, you don't need to hide yourself from me." Hinata gulped and slowly removed her hands and closed her eyes, hoping not to further embarrass herself before Naruto. However, she gasped and saw that Naruto was touching her puss with his hands and he smiled at what he saw. "Naruto-kun. Ah." Hinata moaned out loud as Naruto's hands parted her puss lips slowly as he inspected his first ever female vagina, and he marveled at what he was looking at, and before he could help himself, he picked up the sweet smell of Hinata's juices, and before he could stop himself, the urge to taste her juices hit him and he went forward and licked her say, making Hinata scream out. Realizing that he might have gone too far for the Hyuga heiress, he stopped and apologized to her. "I'm sorry, I guess I went too far this time." No, you just surprised me, Naruto-kun, please, do it again." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Naruto nodded and then went to trying out what he read in the books as he went back to licking and sousing on Hinata's puss, and he loved the moans and groans Hinata was giving out as he continued to taste her say. He enjoyed the feel of her soft and wet say and then found her clee. He recalled all that he had learned in the books and touched Hinata's clee gently. Hinata cried out and she struggled a bit as the feelings her Naruto-kun gave her were driving her crazy. This went on for quite a while until Naruto pushed his tongue past her inner lips and straight into her inner sheath. That was enough to drive Hinata over the edge as she had her orgasm. "Naruto-kun." Hinata arched her body upwards as she felt her body's release, and she felt like she was flying into the sky or floating in a pool of warm energy. She felt more alive than anything as she relaxed and fell back on the mattress and began to pant and gasp as she began to recover. Naruto was nearly overwhelmed when Hinata came as her juices flowed out of her say. He lapped up as much as he could and loved the sweet taste of her juices. He then looked at Hinata as she was covered in a thin sheen of sweat caused by her orgasm. The look of Hinata on their mattress with the light from the fire giving her a glow in her face in pleasure was an image Naruto was not going to forget anytime soon. In the cage where he was imprisoned inside the young ninja, the Kyuubi couldn't help but look on as he was watching the whole event with a very interested eye. He was sorely tempted to go into this and get involved, but decided not to, out of respect for the couple. Besides, just because he was not in control of Naruto's body, it certainly didn't mean he couldn't feel the sensations and emotions the two were radiating. Damn, finally I get to see and feel some action for a change. Naruto smiled as he saw Hinata open her eyes and she was looking at him in a very shy smile as she slowly got up and kissed him, unmindful of the fact that her juices were on his lips. Hinata did know, but didn't seem to mind as she kissed Naruto deeply. It was then that she pushed him down and then began to take off his pants, sandals and then his boxers, revealing his COC to the warm air. Hinata blushed as she looked at Naruto's manhood, as apparently, the whisker marks and fox-like mannerisms were not the only things the Kyuubi imparted on its container. Hinata might have never seen one in the past 16 years of her life before, at least if you count the times when she was still little and they didn't count. She marveled at the fact that Naruto's COC was at a whooping 9 inches. More than enough for a teen his age and more than good in fact. She blushed brightly as she slowly but surely ran her hands over the organ and she stopped a bit when Naruto gasped, thinking that she might have hurt her loved one somehow. She began to apologize, the very same way he did when he thought he was being too forward with her. Sorry Naruto-kun. No, it's all right, I was just surprised. You can go ahead Hina-chan. Hinata smiled and slowly began to run her hands over the long and rather thick COC, amazed at the length and width of it and marveled at how hard it was and the skin was yet so soft and smooth, and she could see the veins as well. She then reached the head of her loved one's sei and couldn't help but admire the deep red tip and its softness. She then had an idea as she had heard about this before being done by some of the women when they were intimate with their boyfriends or husbands. She didn't know if Naruto would like it, but she was willing to try anything now to please Naruto and make him happy. Naruto was in heaven as he felt Hinata's hands slide over his COC with a gentleness and touch that made him ache with want, but he was content to let Hinata go at her own pace. He looked at Hinata and his eyes bugged out as she suddenly began to lick his COC at the shaft, and before he could even utter a sound or ask what she was doing, the sensation of her tongue licking his COC made him howl out in pleasure and surprise. Hinata continued her actions, making Naruto moan out and offer his pleasure, making her even more determined to make him feel happy. She licked his COC from base to tip and even kissed it gently, and while she was not very sure about how to really do it and therefore, was only doing things on trial and error, Naruto was certainly not going to complain. She then took the tip of his COC and slowly began to kiss and lick it, as well as suck on it. Hinata then recalled what else she heard and then relied on that as she slowly began to take in her lover's COC slowly into her mouth and began to slowly move up and down as she was able to take as much as she could. This went on for a few minutes as Naruto screamed out his pleasure as Hinata began to pick up the pace. Hinata was careful as she did this, and while she couldn't take all of it in, she was content as she heard the cries of pleasure from her loved one as she continued to bob her head slowly up and down. So it was natural that since the two of them were virgins, one of them in this point and situation had to give as Naruto finally released his seed into Hinata's mouth, and Hinata likewise felt the twitching of her lover's COC in her mouth, and then she felt his seed hit the roof of her mouth and the back of her throat, and the streams kept on coming as she took in as much as she could manage without choking and moved back, but several more streams landed on her face and some dripped down to her brias. She then tried Naruto's taste and noted a sweet and slightly salty mix, no doubt from all his years of eating ramen and other types of food that managed to get his attention, and there was a slight tingly sensation she felt when she tasted it, and she loved the taste as well. It was the taste of her loved one after all, and with that in mind, she took it in. And noting the seed on her face and on her brias, she decided to take it all in with her fingers and did so, all the while unaware that her Naruto-kun was watching the whole time. Naruto managed to recover due to his massive reserves of stamina and chakra so as to apologize to Hinata for not being able to warn her about his coming release, but the second he saw Hinata swallowing his cum, he was unable to think straight, and when she smiled and began to clean herself with her hands took in his seed. He felt like his brain had just stopped working and his COC was now back at full mast. Wow, Naruto-kun, you taste. Was it bad? If it was no, I like it. Both lovers then held each other tight and Hinata blushed as she could feel Naruto's COC poking her stomach, and when she looked at him, he looked back and they kissed each other. Naruto didn't mind the taste and so did Hinata as they began to kiss, touch, caress and lick one another. This went on, until Naruto then looked at Hinata, wordlessly telling her that it was now time for them to finish this. Hinata nodded as she lay back on the mattress and opened her legs gently, allowing Naruto to get into position between her legs. He used his hand to guide his COC to her puss and he rubbed his COC on her puss lips and clee, making Hinata moan, and she begged for him to place it in before she would faint from the pleasure of it all. Naruto nodded and with some effort and patience was now ready. With a gulp, he slowly began to push into Hinata's sei and Hinata gasped as she felt the tip of Naruto's member enter her most sacred place, and she gasped once more as it passed her outer lips and into her sheath. Like all kunoichi in training, Hinata had broken her maidenhead at some point in her life and therefore, didn't have that to prove her being a virgin, but she had never had sei in her entire life and today was the day she was having it, and with the man she had dreamed countless times of being with as well. Therefore, it was hardly surprising that it was a very snug and tight fit once Naruto was inside. The blonde ninja was amazed that he was able to bury his entire length fully inside Hinata, and Hinata herself never felt so full and gasped as she tried to get used to the sensations. NN Naruto-kun, you're so big. Hina-chan, you're so wet, tight, I've never felt anything like this, it's amazing. Hinata gasped as Naruto managed to push all of his length into her, and then the blonde ninja waited as Hinata got used to his size. And once he was sure that she was comfortable, he slowly began to pull out of her, and Hinata gasped at the delicious sensations that once more assaulted her senses as she felt her inner walls caress Naruto's length. She wanted to feel every sensation as the feelings ran into every corner of her nerves, and she felt the sensations from her puss to her toes, her fingers, and even the roots of her hair. Naruto pulled out as much as he could, and once his cock's tip was in Hinata's sei, he pushed right back in until he was touching Hinata's womb. The dark-haired kunoichi cried out at the sensation of being filled to the brim once more, and that was when Naruto began to establish a rhythm for his thrusts into Hinata's wet sei. As he began to thrust slowly into her puss, Hinata felt her body begin to tingle and grow even more sensitive to the heat and the sensations that flooded her mind and body. As for Naruto, the feel of Hinata's wetness, tightness, and softness was so powerful that he nearly blacked out at the feelings that flooded both his body and his mind as he continued on with his actions. Hina-chan, you feel so, oh. Naruto-kun, harder, more please. The two ninjas began to moan into each other's ears as Naruto got closer to Hinata and used all of his stamina as he continued to thrust into Hinata to bring them both their release, and they both were enjoying it without restraint, and that was a good thing for the two of them as they held each other tightly and they began to shout and groan as Naruto picked up the pace of his thrusts and then worshipped Hinata's breast with kisses, a few licks with his tongue, making Hinata cry out her pleasure. The two then kissed each other deeply, and when they moaned together as Naruto's thrusts grew in speed and power. And the cave was filled with the sounds of their wet flesh hitting each other along with the erotic sounds of their love making. Oh 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 h h h h h h. More. Naruto-kun. Ah. Hina-chan. So hot, so tight. The two of them wanted this very moment to last forever and ever as long as they were alive as they continued to shout and moan their pleasure to each other. But everything has an end as they both of them were now reaching their climaxes, and they both made that fact very clear to one another. I'm going to come. Naruto-kun. Me too, Hina-chan. Both hit their orgasms at the very same time as they shouted their joys. Hinata cried out as she felt the very first stream of Naruto's seed hit her inner walls, and the feeling of it was very much like a bolt of pleasurable energy was flowing into her, along with a feeling of great comforting warmth that flowed through every part of her body. The first jet of Naruto's seed into her hot sei was followed by yet more, and she felt her puss milk her lover's COC to take as much of it as it could handle into it. Naruto likewise was in ecstasy as he felt his release, and the feel of Hinata's inner walls caressing his COC was exquisite as he continued to release his seed into her womb. The feel of the soft, wet, and tight walls milking his sei was so wonderful he was about to faint. Naruto, however, knew that until things were straightened out, he couldn't afford to have Hinata pregnant. Therefore, he learned a trick to make his seed unable to be fertile using his charka, for the sake of safety. As he did so, he slowly began to pull out of his love, and a long trail of seed followed a bit as he lay beside Hinata, who was breathing slowly in and out. The two lovers looked at one another and cuddled closely as Hinata decided to ask him something. How did you move on when you found out about the Kyuubi, and Naruto-kun? I have Iruka-sensei to thank, along with Sakura-chan, Kakashi-san, and even Sasuke, because they are all good people to me. That is why I won't let Sasuke leave, and there's Tsunade Bachan, Ero Sennin, Shizune Nichan, and now there's Yuhina-chan. Hinata blushed brightly and kissed Naruto on the cheek as she held him tightly. She was now part of the small number of people who knew him very well, and until the time came for the truth to come out, she promised to not tell anyone about Naruto's secret. He trusted her with it, and she won't break that trust for as long as she lived. Naruto smiled and held her tightly as well as the two of them slept. The next day, Tsunade was relieved to see that the clouds that had covered the skies over Konoha had just died down, and the reports of clear weather for the rest of the week was even more uplifting news as she quickly called Shizune to the office. Shizune arrived into the office with a smile on her face as the weather told her quickly what the Hokage had in mind. Yes, Tsunade-sama, tell the boats to await our arrival to the port. I will be going along with a select band of ninja to find Naruto and Hinata. Until then, I want you and Iruka to be handling things while I am gone. Yes, Tsunade-sama. The Hokage then contacted all of the ninja who she knew could help in the search, namely Neji Hyuga, his uncle Hiashi, Kiba and Akamaru, Shino and his destruction bugs, and a few others for the search. She didn't mind if several others were on the search, including Sakura as well as Yamato and Kakashi. Later, as they were all there on the boat and set sail, all of them, including Naruto's sensei Jiraiya, went to follow the route the boat that Naruto and Hinata had taken when they were lost, hoping to find them somewhere at sea. On the island, Hinata woke up with a daze and looked about. She found to her surprise that she was very much gnawed and at first wondered what had happened. Then her memories of last night came back to her, and she blushed brightly once more as she realized that all of her dreams had actually come true on this island. She had finally been able to be alone with Naruto, had gotten to know him better, and most of all, told him about her feelings for him, and he accepted them and loved her back. She never felt so happy in all of her life, and she wanted this memory to last forever. She looked at Naruto and she kissed him, and was surprised when Naruto opened his sky blue eyes and kissed her back. They both stayed there for a few more moments, and then they parted and had a conversation about what to do when they were rescued. The two then got dressed and went to the river to clean up, and then managed to find some more fish, berries, wild vegetables, and some rabbits for breakfast. And as Naruto was cooking, Hinata looked out with her Byakugan to see the horizon. So Kit, how was last night? The silent response from his container and the flush of embarrassment told the Kyuubi all he needed to know, and he began to laugh out loud in his cage, and then Naruto responded to the laughter as he had a sneaking suspicion about the laughter the fox was making. Don't tell me you were peeping. Are you kidding me? Of course I was, and damn, who knew you had it in you? Actually, I could have given you some extra stamina for you two to go at it for another batch of rounds so I can have some entertainment apart from fighting for a change. Do you have any idea how utterly boring it is to be inside your body for 15 years and not getting the chance to have any type of action? You perverted fox. Why thank you, I haven't been called that in a very long time. But in all fairness, I'm happy for you. At least you get the girl who loves you even if I'm inside of you. You have no idea how hard that kind of person is to find in this world. You're real lucky to have her by your side. I guess you're right, and at least I've got me some good viewing material to pass the time before we get back to fighting. It'll certainly help relieve the boredom around here. Promise me one thing. That being what? Don't make a habit of recording all of the times between me and Hina-chan, okay? I can't guarantee that just yet, Kit. I happen to like this stuff, but I'd rather focus on the love sessions than all the hugging and talking. I prefer the more physical actions. Like I said, you are one perverted fox. And like I said before, thank you. Hinata looked on and scanned the horizon for any sign of ships coming in as she hoped that she and Naruto would soon be rescued, and sure enough. Naruto-kun, there's a ship out there. A really big ship. Naruto quickly put aside his cooking and rushed up and lit the signal fire, hoping that the people would see it despite the distance between them. He was in luck as another Byakugan user was on the boat as well, but in this case, there were two of them. Neji was currently scanning the horizon with his uncle Hiyashi as the others were also looking about as well. On the front of the boat with the two Hyuga clan members were Jiraiya and Tsunade, along with Sakura, Kakashi, Sai, and Yamato. Neji looked and then spotted a trail of smoke from a distance. Hokage-sama, there's smoke coming from an island at the distance there. The Jonin replied as he pointed in the direction of the smoke, and Hiyashi confirmed it as well as he took out a map of the area they were traveling and noted that there was an island at that direction and uninhabited and unused as well. That island's unused as well, we might find them there as well. Tsunade wasted little time and ordered the captain in her loudest voice to turn in that direction. Naturally not wanting to incur the Hokage's wrath, the captain agreed as the others heard the news and decided to take a look as well. On the island, Hinata cheered as she saw the ship change direction and was heading towards them at this very moment. Naruto-kun. They see us. They're heading back here. We're saved. All right. The two hugged each other, and even though the ship was still far away, they waved towards it. And Naruto got the urge and kissed Hinata gently on the lips as well. Hinata replied with her own kiss, and when they were done, they waved once more to the ship, unaware of the fact that Neji and Hiyashi had seen the whole thing. Well, this is certainly going to be interesting, Hiyashi said with a smile. What's going on other there? Is it Naruto and Hinata on the island? Neji turned and he was smirking and blushing at the same time, making the others look at him in confusion. Tenten nudged Neji, urging him to tell them what he had seen. It's Naruto and Hinata-sama on the island, and they were, hugging, and last we saw, they, kissed. They did what? Jiraiya was smiling perversely as he faced Tsunade, who had a look of shock and surprise on her face. Looks like I win, Tsunade. Everyone else was in shock and surprise, and all of them were already talking about what Neji had just seen. Sakura, Kakashi, Yamato, and Sai looked at one another and tried to figure out just how to react to the news. Epilogue. Hey Naruto. Hurry up. We've gotten a lead on where Sasuke-kun is. Sakura shouted to Naruto as she spotted her teammate and his girlfriend Hinata were walking together with him holding Hinata's groceries as they were heading back to the Hyuga residence. It did the pink-haired kunoichi's heart good to see this, as Naruto was head over heels in love with Hinata. She was very much surprised and spoke with the two a few weeks before, and was surprised indeed when Naruto told her that he told Hinata about his secret, and even more surprised when Hinata told her that she would not tell anyone else about her Naruto-kun's secret. When she found out that Hinata and Naruto did elope, it was a bit shocking, but she was hardly envious as she knew how much Hinata loved Naruto, and she was happy that Hinata got her wish and happy for Naruto to find someone to love. They were still friends and will always be close, and now they have another chance to bring Sasuke back and safely as well. Hinata had changed. She still blushed and stuttered on occasion, but she was now more confident and stronger as well, and she would be there to witness Hinata and Naruto training together as well. Got it, Sakura-chan. Naruto then turned to Hinata and gave an apologetic look to his girlfriend, but Hinata smiled nevertheless and took the groceries from her boyfriend's hands and replied. No need to say anything, Naruto-kun. Go and save Sasuke-san. I'll pray for you that you and the others get back safely. Thanks, Hina-chan. Say hi to Hiyashi-san and Neji for me. As Hinata watched her boyfriend leave, she smiled and headed off to her home. Hiyashi and Neji were not angry with her, much to her surprise, and actually pushed her towards having a relationship with Naruto, and so were the others. And even Hanabi was supportive of her relationship with Naruto, along with the others of her family, and that made her feel that finally she had a happy life. As she walked away, she smiled at the sun and rubbed her belly, dreaming of the day that she could start her own family with Naruto. Early morning, Naruto looked at the sea with a smile as he took a good long draught of the cool sea air. He had just been sent on a diplomatic envoy to Sea Country. He had been selected by Tsunade since she decided that it would be better for him to travel and be on the move than staying in the village all the time, plus since he was on the move, it would make it harder for Akatsuki to track his movements. Many people thought that such tactics was a bad idea, namely those who were afraid of Akatsuki getting their hands on Naruto. However, Tsunade was adamant on the idea of keeping Naruto on the move, and she felt that with each experience, Naruto would be able to improve his own abilities. Plus the vacation was needed in order for him to deal with other matters, apart from finding Sasuke all over again. Naruto at first disliked the idea, but Tsunade was more than capable of convincing him to take the mission vacation. Actually, she once more used her power to convince the hyperactive teen to take the mission, and if there was one thing Naruto learned, it was to never argue with Tsunade when she was really in a bad mood. However, he didn't dislike Tsunade and considered her as family, and in a way, he didn't mind the trip. He was not alone, however, as Tsunade had assigned him a protector Anbu, but it was not Kakashi nor was it Yamato, as both of the said men were on other duties. Yamato was currently working on with gathering details on Akatsuki. Alongside Jiraiya, Kakashi was busy taking care of Asuma's old team of Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino. Sakura was currently working on making some new antidotes and also learning a few new techniques from Tsunade. Hinata was not around for today as she was busy working with Shino, Kiba and Akamaru on several details around the village until Kurenai was fully recovered from giving birth to her child, who turned out to be a boy. Everyone was busy and here he was, riding a large liner and heading back home to Konoha. It would take several days before they made it back to Konoha, so he might as well enjoy himself even if this vacation was not what he had in mind in the first place. However, he took in the smell of food and with a grin, made his way into the galley. As much as he missed Ichiraku ramen back home, he was not adverse to the food on the ship, though he wished they would try some pork in the food. As he made his way to the mess hall, he decided to order another meal. He took out his frog wallet and smiled at the good amounts of money he still had left from his last missions. He paid the cashier and took his food with him. He and his protector were currently taking different rooms in the upper cabins, and the rooms were spacious enough to allow private dining for the guests. As he made sure to balance the meals he was carrying, Naruto then recalled the time he had been placed on this mission. Flashback. In the Hokage's office. What? You can't be serious, Tsunade Obasan. Naruto shouted in a loud voice as he digested just what Tsunade had called him to the tower for. He had just done another mission for today as he and his team had lost track of Sasuke and Orochimaru yet again, and it frustrated him to no end that Sasuke was still not coming back, and now this. Tsunade glared and shouted right back at him. Quit shouting, Naruto. And I am serious. Naruto felt a vein pop on his head as he and Tsunade, with a vein on her head as well, glared at one another, while Shizune and Sakura were watching, along with Sai, Yamato, and Kakashi. Sai was the only one who was not showing any emotion on his face, as per his training en route, but the others however were tense and worried as the two glared at one another. They had seen Tsunade angry before and were not in the mood to court the legendary kunoichis' temper, but Naruto was among the very few people they knew who was far from intimidated, and over the years proved that he was not going to back down easily. The two still glared at each other for a few more minutes until Naruto decided to just cool his head and he sighed and glared at Tsunade. Fine, I'll do it, but you still could have just sent someone else, Tsunade Obasan. Yes, I would have, but I prefer that you go since you've been working non-stop lately. You're not going to be able to track Sasuke if you're down and out, Naruto-kun, and he's not been seen weeks, so we think he might be on the move as well. So just to be sure, you can try finding clues while they're in sea country on the off chance that he and Orochimaru are up to something there. Naruto smiled widely at that as Tsunade smiled a bit at the look of happiness on his face, but she was still being serious about this and spoke with authority to Naruto. But make one thing clear, Naruto-kun, do not try to do things on your own, and don't use your new Rasengan no matter what. Do not try to engage either Sasuke or Orochimaru if you run into them. Do you understand me? Naruto looked at Tsunade and saw a slight pleading look in her normally cool and tough facade, and having known how Tsunade had suffered when the two men she loved in her life died from Shizune, the niece of her loved one Dan, he knew that she would never forgive herself if anything happened to him. He might argue with Tsunade, but he did respect her and he knew that she respected him back, so he should at least show faith in her judgment, and even if it was a bit flawed at times, it truly helped him grow stronger, not just in his overall skills as a ninja, but as a person. With that in mind, he nodded. I won't do anything foolish, Tsunade Obasan. I promise. Tsunade looked at the blonde ninja and sighed with a bit of relief as she could see that he meant every word. As much as she wished not to let him loose, She knew that she said herself that Naruto would become a great ninja and an even better Hokage in the near future. After all, his father had been one himself. Tsunade and her teammate Jiraiya were among the very few who truly knew about Naruto's relationship to the fourth Hokage, and who his mother was. He so resembled them both it was uncanny, and she wanted him to survive to fulfill his dream. Granted, her method was a bit off the wall, but it worked as Naruto grew even stronger. However, she knew better than to let him go alone without any supervision. You're going to be accompanied by another on this mission, Naruto-kun, so don't think that you're going to be on your own all the time. Naruto then looked at Tsunade and wondered just who she was going to assign to keep an eye on him. He knew that it couldn't be Shizune since she was Tsunade's secretary and she needed to work with all the paperwork in the village. It certainly wasn't going to be Kakashi since he had been assigned to fill in for the deceased Asuma until Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino got a new sensei. Yamato was taking the time to help Jiraiya track Akatsuki. Sai was getting used to working with the others, and he was still not used to having the guy around, and as much as he would have wanted it, Sakura had duties to take care of here in Konoha as well, so just who was Tsunade Obasan going to pair him with? He got his answer as a knock came on the door, and when it opened, a female voice came into the room. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama. Naruto turned and spotted someone who he didn't recognize at first, until he looked a bit further at her face. Why does she look so familiar to me? End of flashback. Naruto learned later from Kakashi that he was being accompanied by Azuki Yugo, an ANBU that he had trained with years before in his time in the military arm of Konoha, and she was Gekko Hayate's former girlfriend. He recalled that Hayate was among those killed in the attack of Sand when Orochimaru had duped Sand into attacking his home village, though the Chunin swordsman had been killed before that attack itself. The woman was currently resting in the room that she stayed in and apparently was very tired with all the traveling they had been doing once they got into Sea Country. They had done their mission to deliver the Hokage's message to the leader they had to visit, but to his disappointment, they found no trace of either Sasuke or Orochimaru. It felt like going back to square one all over again. Naruto put those thoughts aside as he arrived in front of Yugo's room and he knocked on the door, hoping that Azuki was awake. The door opened and the violet-haired female Anbu opened the door. She was not dressed in her Anbu armor for this mission and was instead dressed in the same fashion as Kakashi or Yamato was and had only the vest off. Yugo looked at Naruto in a bit of surprise as she appeared to have been somewhat busy before he had arrived. What is it, Naruto-kun? Sorry to disturb you, Yugo-san, but I brought you your breakfast. I don't know what you liked, so I hope this is okay for you. The female Anbu looked at the wrapped meal and smelled the food. She smiled at Naruto gently and moved aside. Please come in, Naruto-kun. Thank you for bringing it to me. Naruto smiled as he walked into the spacious room that Yugo stayed in. The room was well furnished and comfortable, just like his room without being too showy. The Hokage had managed to place a good deal of money on the operation, though Naruto was rather thrifty in that regard and kept a good amount of his money hidden away for further use, and away from Jiraiya, so not all of the money was from Konoha's accounts. Yugo's vest was on a nearby chair next to a table and she was currently working on checking up on her supplies of weapons. Naruto waited for Yugo to move the weapons aside and he placed her breakfast on the table. The female Anbu smiled at how nice the young genin was when he placed her breakfast on the table. He certainly was quite the gentleman, and so unlike the Kyuubi inside of him. Like many people from nearly 12 years ago, Azuki Yugo knew of the Kyuubi being sealed inside of Naruto by the Yondaime, though she was very young at the time. And it had been quite a number of years since she had seen the young blonde as she had grown up when training in the ANBU. She had met him in the funeral of the Sandaime after Sarutobi was killed and she had to admit that the young boy had grown up a lot since she had seen him when he was a baby. In fact, when she had seen him in the Hokage's room, she was a bit surprised that the blonde teen looked vaguely familiar to her until she was told who he was. The first few thoughts that came to her mind were how much he had grown since she had last seen him, how tall he was, and he certainly had grown a lot more good-looking. At the remembrance of that last thought, she chided herself for thinking of such things. Besides, Naruto was still too young. Granted, he was no longer 12 years old, but she did have 8 years ahead of him, and it was odd for her to think that way of the blonde kid. Now he was already nearing the age for that sort of thing, but she shouldn't think about such things for now. She still held on to the memory of her past love Hayate, and she still cared for his memory, and while it was hard knowing that he was gone, she still cared for him, and as such, it was hardly proper for her to think about these things involving Naruto of all people. But he was still a nice boy nevertheless. As Naruto placed down the food, he then thought that he felt he had forgotten something, and it didn't take very long for her to find out what it was that he had forgotten. Darn, I forgot to get a drink. What do you want to drink, Yugo-san? I'll pay for it. Yugo smiled at him and replied to his question. Just some jasmine tea if you don't mind. Sure, I'll just drop my food off in my room and get you your tea, Yugo-san. With that, Naruto left Azuki as he went to his room to place away his own break fast, allowing the Anbu the time to study her food, and found some good sushi, sashimi, rice balls, and tempura with beef pot, with some vegetables as well. The female Anbu smiled as she sat down and began to have her break fast. As she ate her meal, she began to think about how things had been in Konoha after the invasion. Her fellow Anbu had been pulling double duty ever since the attack by Sand and Sound, and so had she when she was part of the routine patrols and more. It had been stressful for her, even more so now that Hayate was gone. Hayate and her had been very close when they were younger, as she used to watch out for him due to his chronic sickness. Despite that, he was a good ninja and worked hard despite the occasional coughs that indicated his health, and she admired him for that. However, at times she wished that he would take better care of his health when he could have the time. As they both got older, she and Hayate became closer, though her duties prevented them from getting closer when she became an Anbu and they had very few times together. However, they cherished those times together, and even if it was going to be hard, they hoped that maybe they would have a chance to make a life together in Konoha, and if they could, even have a family. But it was never meant to be when he was found killed days before the Chunin exam and the invasion of Sound and Sand. Though she eventually found out that the Sand Jonin Baki was the one who killed Hayate, he vowed that he was willing to face her anger for the death of her beloved. However, she had gathered the courage to move on, and though she no longer had Hayate by her side, she still made sure to make him proud of her by continuing her duties in defending Konoha from those who threatened it. However, it was hard for her to move on, and at times she woke up and cried when she knew that she was alone in her room. No, Hayate-kun would have never wanted me to be moping all the time. I have to be strong and I have a duty to do. With that, Azuki managed to stop herself from crying and focused on her food, and she turned and smiled when Naruto once more knocked on the door. She had learned that the blonde ninja knocked on doors in a certain way, so she could tell that it was him on her door. She got up and opened the door, and sure enough, the blonde ninja was before her with a teacup and a small pot filled with warm jasmine tea on a tray. Here's your jasmine tea, Yugo-san. Azuki smiled warmly as she managed to keep herself from crying as she recalled how she and Hayate would drink the same tea together. She then reached out and took the tray. Thank you, Naruto-kun. No problem. I'll finish my own break fast and head off to the deck for training. I'll be there if you need me, Yugo-san. As Naruto walked into his room, Yugo smiled at him as she looked at his retreating form, and she once more found herself admiring the blonde ninja as he had been growing stronger and certainly looked a lot more impressive looking. She chided herself once more when she found herself looking at his posterior. Yugo blushed a bit and sighed, as it had been so long since Hayate's death, and despite knowing some very nice-looking men in her time, she still didn't feel inclined to start another relationship. But she admitted that she was a woman after all, and like any normal woman she had needs too. The female Anbu put that aside as she went to her table and poured herself a nice hot cup of tea and drank the liquid as she finished the last of her break fast. After a few minutes of quiet reflection and relaxation, she wondered what she should be doing today. She didn't have many duties as she was only assigned to keep Naruto safe, and while she was not the best Anbu in the rest of the corps, she had enough skill for Kakashi to trust her with the safety of his student, and so did Tsunade. And she was not going to break that trust to either of them, as she was not planning to be sent back to being a genin once more. She sighed as she finished her meal and decided to go out and do something to relieve the boredom that had settled on her for some time. As she finished her meal and looked out into the ocean, she heard footsteps rushing out, and from the sound of the feet, it would no doubt be Naruto himself, and she wished him the best of luck with whatever training he was going to take. She then decided to observe just how skilled Naruto was and then took out her own weapons and left her room. As she made her way to the deck, there were times that several male passengers gave her leering looks, but she ignored them as she moved to the deck to see to her charge. Hayate admitted that he was at times wondering why she, a beautiful woman, would be interested in him, but she assured him that she was serious about her feelings towards him and he decided to leave it at that. This was happening since she was not wearing her normal Anbu attire to better fit into her mission of being Naruto's guardian. Speaking of which, she wondered just what sort of ruckus did Naruto start this time. However, it seemed that the peace was not going to last, as an alarm filled the air. Pirates! Azuki groaned and quickly rushed to the deck, and as she looked at a nearby window, there were indeed several smaller boats filled with pirates. The men on the ships appeared to be dressed in the usual garb worn by pirates and were armed with an assortment of weapons, from spears, harpoons, clubs, swords, and other weapons. Pirates plighted the waters on more than one instance and were always a nuisance to many shipping businesses. That was why some ship liners had their own corps of soldiers to fight them off. The female Anbu reached the deck and blocked a strike from a club with her kunai. She looked and found herself staring at a man who looked messed up with a beard caked in salt crystals and smelled of rotting fish. The man smiled at her in a disgusting manner, and paid for it as Azuki managed to kick him aside and defeat him, sending him crashing into 3 of his companions, and they too fell right back into the drink. Azuki turned around and spotted more pirates attacking, and before she could fight back, Kage Bushin Jutsu. She turned and so did the pirates as several bands of shadow clones belonging to a certain hyperactive blonde ninja came on the scene and bashed the living daylights out of the pirates trying to board the ship from the other side. The Kage Bushin were mixing it up with the pirates as Naruto himself was busy fighting one of the pirates, and a fairly large guy, almost the same size as the one he socked out cold with the aid of his Kage Bushin back when he, Sasuke, and Sakura were still younger and working together with Kakashi. The pirate had no time to react when he got beaten hard by the better skilled ninja. Azuki fought her way to Naruto and managed to be back to back with the blonde kid. "Are you all right, Naruto-kun?" "I'm fine, but these guys aren't giving up so easily. Here they come again." Naruto and Azuki fought on with the pirates until they were aided by the ship's defenders. They were able to push the pirate back, but it didn't take long for the pirates to come up with attacks of their own as they had comrades on smaller boats, and these guys were armed with bows and crossbows, all armed with fire arrows. The arrows came as several more pirate groups attacked, and even Naruto was getting overwhelmed, not because of the pirates, but because of both the battles with the pirates and putting out the fires at the same time. At first the fires were manageable, but with the pirates attacking and the fires spreading, even Naruto knew that the situation was not looking good. With that in mind, he sent his Kage Bushin to the pirates and attacked their crew. And after a few minutes, the pirates were forced to retreat. However, the damage had been done, and while the pirates didn't get the loot they wanted, the ship they had attacked was too badly damaged as the fires spread too rapidly for the crew and the brave volunteers to contain as the ship burned. Naruto did his best to help contain the blaze so as the crew could leave, and the Kyuubi was not happy with what was going on. "Kit, we've got to leave the ship now. She's burning too fast." "I know that, Fox. Just give me a few more minutes until we can be able to get the others out of here." "Damn it, Kit. Now is not the time to play the hero here." As Naruto helped keep the fires at bay, he was suddenly grabbed by Azuki, who had managed to get a lifeboat that was still moored in. The rest of the crew had already left the ship, and while there were others left on the ship, the female Anbu knew that it would already be too late for them to escape. Her main concern was Naruto-kun's safety, both as her duty to the Hokage and her own desire not to let this young man die after all the things he had done for the village. "But there. I know, Naruto-kun, but your safety is my concern." The female Anbu managed to get the blonde ninja on the boat, and as the boat was about to be lowered down, she was stunned to find that one of the containers in the deck was filled with explosive tags. Oh no. Azuki managed to get on the boat and push off until they were in the clear, but the tags exploded and the ship was blown apart. The female Anbu used her strength to steer the boat clear, and they seemed to be going out of it, but then Naruto blocked an incoming plank of wood that was burning hot and sending out embers. The plank was destroyed by the blonde ninja, but the explosion had sent out more debris from the burning ship, and some of them managed to hit home. Naruto was able to heal due to the Kyuubi's chakra. But the female Anbu was hit by a burning piece of wood hard on the shoulder, and had bypassed her vest's padding and placed splinters that were now buried deep into her right shoulder, and another burning piece of sharp wood struck her hat on her head, making the female Anbu groan in pain and nearly fall off the boat as she was losing consciousness. However, she didn't fall into the water as Naruto managed to grab her and the blonde managed to guide their boat away as the ship sank to the bottom of the sea. The blonde ninja then looked at his older guard and found Azuki to be unconscious from the blows to her body from the debris that hit her hard. As soon as he was sure that they were away from the burning boat which was now out of sight, he looked at her wounds and he panicked as he saw the bits of wood that buried themselves on her shoulder and the bleeding from her head from a rather long gash on the back of her head. This is not good. What the hell am I going to do now? Naruto then realized that they were going to be in serious trouble if they were not able to make it to land and find a medical specialist fast to treat Azuki's injuries, and to make it worse, there were signs of rain coming in soon as the clouds began to gather. The blonde decided to do what he could for the female Anbu, but he had no idea how. The blonde didn't have any medical training to speak of and he had no skills in medical jutsu at all. Man, I wish Sakura-chan was here. Kit, how bad is she hurt? She's bleeding really bad on the head and there's splinters of wood on her shoulder. The blonde heard his resident growl at that and he waited for what the Kyuubi was going to say next. And he didn't have to wait very long. There's bound to be some islands near this area, we'll have to head west for now, there might be one there. But what about? Head wounds always bleed badly, Kit, but check her head, is it cracked or broken? Naruto slowly ran his hands on Azuki's head and noted that despite the blood, her head seemed fine. There were no signs of cracking as far as he could sense. I don't feel anything, but what can we do? I don't know any medical jutsu. I noticed that, but we can fix that soon enough, use your chakra like this. As Naruto followed the Kyuubi's instructions, he was relieved to see his blue chakra turn into green chakra, the type used in healing jutsus, and he noted that the head wound on Azuki was disappearing, though there was a lot of blood in her hair. The wound appeared to be holding as soon as he was finished, and the Kyuubi spoke to him. There, not the best medical jutsu you and I have, but it'll keep her wound from bleeding, keep the bones from cracking, and it'll allow her to mend on her own. What about the wood splinters on her shoulder? Shouldn't we remove them? We will, Kit, but not out here. Now haul that butt of yours and find an island. Naruto wasted no time and took the rudder and followed the direction west without argument. He would have wanted to trade word barbs with the kitsune, but now was not the time for such things as he had to ensure Azuki's safety first. As the boat made its way west for several hours, Naruto turned to look behind him and he swore as he spotted dark storm clouds moving towards them. That is not good. The blonde then focused on guiding the boat, and as the boat moved on, thankfully the currents were good, they were now a good distance ahead of the clouds, but the blonde knew better than to relax as he knew that the medical jutsu he used was not permanent and Azuki needed proper medical care if she was to be fine. He heard her moan in pain as the motions of the waves made her body move to hit the sides of the boat, though that was slow, the splinters were buried deeper in her flesh, making her groan more in pain. Damn it, we've got to do something. Quit yelling, Kit. We're almost there. See those birds? Naruto looked and spotted several gulls flying away from the approaching storm clouds that were still a good distance away from them, but gaining speed. I see them, so what? Think, Kit. Birds like them have nests around here, and the only place they'd nest is on islands. Those birds are heading home from the storm, and right to an island. Keep an eye on them for as long as you can. The blonde followed the Kyuubi's advice, and after several more minutes, they spotted a large island ahead of them, and seemed to have a good deal of foliage, trees, and some large cliffs as well. The place looked ordinary, but after all they had gone through for several hours, the island seemed like paradise as Naruto used the tides to guide him into the island. Later on the island, Naruto was tired as he took Azuki and placed her to lie on her stomach the walls of the cave, careful not to aggravate the wound she still had on her head and also the splinters. The cave walls came in handy to keep her safe from the winds that were now blowing about. As soon as they hit the island, the storm clouds came and the place became really choppy. Thankfully he was able to use the Kyuubi's chakra to enhance his strength to take the boat into the beach and took out the rope and tie the boat securely, and he then took out the female Anbu from the boat and found a large cave near the beach, which he was currently inside of now. As he did so, The rain hit the island hard and the winds coming into the cave were wet and cold. This made Naruto shiver and he knew that he had to help Azuki first, but he knew they needed a fire and fast. There should be some driftwood in this cave, better go look for it as soon as you can kid and get a fire going. But what about Azuki? We can't leave her like this. Keep your damn shirt on, Kit. If you want, take off that jacket of yours and use it as a blanket for her when you have the chance, but for now, we need to find wood for a fire, or else the cold will make things worse. Thanks for listening. In the next part. In the meantime, please leave a review, I would love to hear your feedback. Especially if it helps me improve the overall story.